Here. I have to say this is the largest audience that I've seen in my 8.5 months with DUG. So thank you all for being here and for joining today's presentation. Just a few notes about DUG. Dynamics User Group is the most fun and superhero-packed community for the Dynamics 365 Power Platform Dynamic GP community, and we thank you all for being here. If you haven't had a chance to become a member of DUG, the membership is free, and I'll drop a link later on to get you that information. Also, DUG, we are a 35,000 plus member strong organization, again, that supports the Microsoft Dynamics 365 Power Platform and Dynamics GP products. We've got a bunch of different fun programs that are out there for you to be a part of. And the ones that I want to talk about specifically today outside of our meetup are the upcoming conferences that we have. Mark your calendars. March 15th will be the virtual conference. It'll be a one-day. It's free to attend. Get your session submitted soon. We'll open the voting in January. So take a look at that. Also mark your calendars for an in-person event in Scottsdale, Arizona, May 22nd through the 25th. So that's a little bit about DUG. I'll also have my contact information if you would like some more information about our programs, how you can support us, how you can be a part of this community, also be speakers. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to today's hosts with Mary Brummer, and she is going to get the most exciting content that y'all came here to see anyway and to hear about. I know I'm excited to hear from the Department of Justice because I think it'll be really fun. And I turn it over to Mary.
Great. Thanks, Denise. Hello, everyone. So just want to give a quick plug for DUG4GOV. So DUG4GOV is the state and local specific user group for Dynamics and Power Platform. So super excited about that. Want everybody to join. Lots of great things that we offer. One of the things that we do is what we're doing today is it's a virtual meetup. And we have a super great guest today. I'm so excited about this. It's the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And Stephen is here, and he is going to present their 4-year Power Platform journey. And so with that, Stephen, I am going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mary and Denise. Appreciate the introduction. So I'm going to be rehashing a presentation we put together for the TASC conference this year, so I apologize if you see that verbiage on there. That's what that's referring to. Give me a second here to get set up. Sure. Okay.
I should say too that this is being recorded. So this is a recorded session. So I just want to make that announcement. If you're not comfortable being on a recorded session, please drop now.
Okay, great. And I'm totally open to questions throughout. So if you want to stop me at any point, if you want to post some questions in chat, Mary or Denise, if y'all are watching that chat for me, if you can just call them out for me.
Absolutely.
They're not gonna pop up for me. So my name is Stephen Kreniak, and I lead one of the 4 development teams at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, TDCJ. We're going to be talking today about some of the products on the Power Platform, and specifically about some real-world application, kind of progressing these products through a real state agency. So we're a Texas agency based in Huntsville, Texas. I'm going to be taking us through 4 projects spanning back through 2018 up to the present. So we're going to kind of do a one-a-year kind of thing. I'm not going to be going into a lot of technical depth on this presentation. It's going to be more about the progression. So if you're brand new to the Microsoft line of cloud products, just know it's not going to keep you from understanding or follow along with the presentation. Some quick background on myself. I've been with TDCJ for a little more than 4 years now, working with Power Platform and Dynamics, 3 years as a developer and the last year leading a team. Before that, I was primarily involved with cloud sales platforms. Earlier in my career, I did OS migrations with Reliant Energy and NASA in Houston. So been digging through the Microsoft line of products for a long time. And just from a career perspective, it really is an exciting time to be working with this stuff. There's been this persistent push over the last few decades towards getting things to work together, and we're finally really at that time. So as far as my team here at TDCJ, we break our development teams into area of interest. So we have 4 different programming teams. My team's called the Inmate Systems team, mostly focused around systems related to the inmates, things like housing, banking, releases, disciplinary, things like that. My team's a little bit unique in that we bridge the gap between the legacy systems that we still have and our modern cloud-based systems. And I think I actually have several members of my team on the call, so maybe afterwards if someone wants to connect, there'll be a few extra people to reach out to. So out of that team, it's 7 COBOL programmers that's working on our legacy mainframe systems, 6 developers that are working on Dynamics and Power Platforms, Power Platform, and 3 DBAs for the entire agency. So this team was put together to structured specifically to harness the knowledge that the legacy team brings forward. They've obviously have a depth of knowledge and bring it forward along with our more modern specialized folks. So I'm not sure what the level, I expect that this group has quite a varied experience level on these products, but I hope at least some of y'all have experienced some of the workshops Microsoft puts on. They're really good. I'm thinking of the App in a Day workshop. If you haven't done that yet, I highly recommend. It does a great job taking you through the Power Apps piece of the Power Platform and gives you kind of a little bit of a feel for how these things flow together, gives you a snapshot basically of how this one product works. From a state government in particular, we have a lot of extra bureaucracy to deal with. It can be hard to translate something that you look at and you say, wow, that's really neat, into something that you can actually budget for and execute. So I'm going to be starting at 2018 and taking us forward to the present time. So in 2018, we were just starting to look at our major modernization efforts. No real use of the Power Platform, but we had Outlook for email, Active Directory for identity management, and the Office suite of business tools. And actually, a lot of those things we had only recently switched to. So I think at the time, one of the major considerations was security. Of course, it still is. Streamlining products alongside of Active Directory was an appealing aspect of moving towards Microsoft's Power Platform. So the first step that we took really as an agency into these products was shopping for a commercial off-the-shelf or COTS product. I'm assuming y'all are all familiar with that, the way that goes. In my opinion, that ended up being a very good first step. It let us utilize the vendor's experience while we were still new to the platform, and it gave us a chance to streamline the budget and procurement process. It was a normal, bid process, something we're all familiar with. We did start some basic training at the time, but we didn't really have anyone in the building that was, very in-depth knowledgeable about the product. So this is something that you can accomplish even if you have no one internal with experience. Just before I'm going to go into some demos here, but before I do, just a bit of hindsight to call out here is if you're at this point in your journey, keep an eye on how your purchased COTS product will be extended in the future. You have the vendor there working with you to get this product off the ground, but they're not always going to be there. So, watch how that maintenance agreement looks. See what it looks like, see what it includes. You want to be able to either take that in-house or make sure that the maintenance support agreement is going to accommodate your expectations. So the product that we purchased was for our Victim Services Department. The product is called Integrated Victim Services System. The abbreviation is IVIS. I'll refer to it that way going forward. IVIS is a notification system for victims and families of crimes to receive information about activities related to the inmates. So something like if an inmate's being released on parole, the family can sign up to receive notifications as that's happening. So in this case, one of the key features is a power page, which is the portal, the web accessible part of the platform that allows the public to log in and set up those notifications. This was an entirely vendor-created product, and it remains to this day very minimal input from TDCJ. So definitely a COTS product, not something homegrown. It does integrate from our legacy data sources on a batch basis, so it receives a chunk of data every day. And it has a basic model-driven Dynamics application for administration that sits behind the Power page. Quick note about this one is that it has been extremely stable. I mentioned that half my team are mainframe COBOL programmers, and in any given month, they'll spend at least 25% of their time maintaining old code and fixing issues. New product like IVIS, we can measure the total downtime over the last 4 years in minutes. Very, very low downtime, very low maintenance. I don't get any middle of the night phone calls about IVIS. So I apologize, I don't have a demo for this one. This is you can imagine pretty sensitive data since we're working with victim information in this platform, but I promise we'll have some demos going forward. Moving on to 2019, where we had a little bit of COTS experience under our belt, we're going to start talking about the internal development, which I'm hoping is something that everyone on the call is interested in hearing about. TDCJ was not a stranger at this time to developing new software. At that time, new development was mostly centered around our Java and distributed applications group. But when we talk about these days about low code or no code, Java development is kind of the exact opposite. You can do kind of whatever you want with Java, but you're talking about a full project timeline, lots of lines of codes to type out. So we have a very talented Java group here, and they still do work with us. But just because of the nature of the coding time, and the development timelines being long, it ended up taking quite an experienced programmer to pull off most of those development projects. We did, as I mentioned in 2019, had a bit of experience from following along with the IVIS development. In terms of numbers, we had 2 whole developers and 1 system administrator that knew their way around these systems a little bit. So we're not talking about huge numbers. One of the early bits of foresight that our leadership had was budgeting for some development space. So at the time, and I'm kind of hiding this, but it was myself and one other person that kind of got dropped into the Dynamics stuff at the time, specifically Dynamics. And leadership at the time gave us a little bit of a longer leash to explore the products, get training on them, and start demonstrating some proof of concept type activities. So with some hindsight, it really is totally possible without that little allocation of, personnel and a little bit of money to get the space for us. We might not have ever gone further down that road. At the time, Dynamics space was charged largely by the instance, not the total storage volume. So it was a conscious decision on their part to set aside some money to enable us, the developers and the administrators, to get some hands-on experience. Some quick roadblocks, considerations to consider, and I guess I just want to pause real quick, make sure I'm going to pop up my chat window, make sure I don't have any questions sitting here. Ooh, y'all are quiet. No questions.
Yeah, no questions yet, Stephen, but maybe just someone put a question in there just to we make sure the chat's working.
That's okay. We'll open up the mics here at the end, so if we have any technical problems, we'll go ahead and address them at the end, but.
Sounds great.
Excuse me. That's one of the nice things about being able to mute your microphone these days. I see sample questions, so we are capable of typing questions. Okay. Well, y'all just let me know if anything pops up. I want to get back to it here.
Yes, we will.
Okay, so roadblocks to overcome. First one I mentioned earlier is security. Always, it's got to be at the top of our minds. I mentioned that we've been using Active Directory, and of course, you can leverage Active Directory using Java or a lot of other, pretty much anything else can tie into Active Directory. Using it natively through Power Platform was really appealing. It just kind of works. We hear a lot of these days about single point sign-on, but with Power Platform, it really is just a standard feature. And especially as a developer, it's very appealing to have that removed as something that we're constantly reevaluating. Licensing is a bit of an opposite. A little bit of light Microsoft criticism here. At least over the last 4 years, licensing has been something that's rapidly evolved. So it's, and since it's so closely tied to your cost for the project, it is something that you want to revisit frequently. On the plus side, Microsoft has a lot of really great resources out there. There's always someone that you can reach out to and ask. I think I have an email out right now asking about a licensing question. So it's just something you want to put on your radar that you need to stay on top of, talk to your contacts with, just constantly be reevaluating. We're not talking about major swings in how your projects will be priced, but it is there, something you need to consider. If you're in state government here in Texas, part of our complication is that the agreements will differ from the commercial agreements. So you do need to find a person that knows what they're talking about as far as the enterprise, your specific enterprise agreement. I have government navigating the government cloud here. In the Azure cloud world is referred to as the government cloud, GCC. So this is going to depend on your specific organization, whether or not you have to utilize it. TDCJ houses several different forms of protected data, and the GCC is certified to do that. If you are required to be on the GCC, just be aware that the feature set tends to be 6 to 9 months behind the commercial cloud. It's not usually an issue, but from a development standpoint, it can be a little frustrating to find accurate information. Something breaks, you do a web search on the topic, and you find a great article that is unfortunately describing something that's available in the commercial cloud, and your problem is actually a feature that's not yet available in government. So again, this is not something that is frequently an issue, and I will add that Microsoft is really good about getting feature parity caught back up. The feature parity difference is just due to the additional certifications involved. It's not something that I don't know of anything specifically that's purposely been left out of the GCC. It just sometimes takes a little bit longer to get there. The last roadblock here is staffing. So as you hopefully will see, and as we go through the presentation here, this wasn't something that TDCJ master planned. From the start, we didn't have a 4-year plan that was executed and totally lined out ahead of time. It basically grew over time as we were able to demonstrate success and cost effectiveness. So I'll emphasize this a bit later on, but when you're looking at staffing, make sure you're considering all the different types of positions needed to execute a project. In our case, I mentioned that starting with COTS gave us a soft spot to get people's feet wet a little bit. Just make sure you're not only piling this on the developers. This requires the full gamut of people involved, so the administrators, the security folks, and all the project-related people.
Stephen, we do have a question from Jeremiah.
Sure.
Did you actually integrate mainframe, or was it a migration of data? If integration, can you speak a little more about the details?
Sure, and I'll be able to share some more details as we go further. So I've shown you the IVSS project. That was the COTS vendor. So that it depends on your definition of integration. That is kind of a nuanced word these days, but it is integrated. So it gets fresh data out of our legacy data sources every day. I don't know what the exact schedule is for that. I think it's more frequently than once a day, but in this case, it is a one-way integration, so it's only receiving data out of our legacy data source. But as we get a little bit further, we'll talk about some more complicated ways that it got integrated. But yes, so the IVSS system talks directly to our legacy mainframe system.
Great. And Esther has a question. What kind of training did you provide to your developers?
So early on, like I mentioned, it really was just a little bit of extra rope where, we just kind of got through into it. They said, we're interested, we're looking at COTS products. We're interested in going this direction. See what you can do with this. So really, from that standpoint, it was just some time and permission to do so. We pretty quickly did get into some actual Microsoft training courses. I mentioned earlier the App in a Day course. Microsoft puts on quite a few workshops. I'm sure if you reach out, they can point you to resources that are available to your organization. And I apologize, I'm going to throw out some things that I just don't know if it's going to apply necessarily to you, but just to make you aware of it, some organizations, TDCJ included, our agreements cover certifications, for instance. So that's a great thing to offer to your staff. They're not overly expensive certifications, but $100, $150 a piece, that's something that's covered in the agreement. So sort of way to incentivize staff and also get some training going at the same time.
Great.
And then I don't know if I have a slide on this later on, but I guess I'll touch on it now. We actually did develop an internal training course specifically for TDCJ with the purpose of onboarding folks as quickly as possible. So I'm sure TDCJ is not the only agency or group that's dealing with a lot of staff turnover these days. So it's important that we have a program in place to get people up to speed quickly. So, and I can take that offline if I don't have a slide about it later. But like I said, the point is, it's a program, and I'll say the first step of the program is we tell the new employee, go get one of these certifications, because the certification lets you kind of talk the same language with each other. It's a good jump point, and it's a good technical, especially the fundamentals level. Certifications are a good just base level understanding of the material, and then we step forward into some more homegrown stuff after that. But you can feel free to reach out to me afterwards. Good talk.
Great. And Don has a question. From a staffing perspective, was the decision to go Microsoft help with your future strategies for your dev teams?
Decision to go. Like I said, this was really an evolution. So we've added staff to this part of the team as we've gone. So back on that previous slide, I still have more COBOL staff on my team than I do Microsoft developers, but that's obviously been added to over time. Similar to the Active Directory, the admin folks. It really, I'm not sure if I'm getting at the crux of your question here, but Microsoft, I guess I would say that we had enough existing Microsoft products in place, like the normal Office stuff, that we had people around that were able to dip their toes in the water a little easier than bringing someone totally fresh, totally unfamiliar with Microsoft. They're very ubiquitous. I mean, we all are probably sitting on a Windows computer here right now, so the there's at least that base level understanding of the company. Oh, I got some clarification here. Meeting, tying. Oh, so yes. Okay, so I get where you're going with that. So we came at it from a little bit of a different angle. So actually at the time, there was definitely a concern. We were a mainframe shop, and it was getting hard, and it still is. It's getting harder and harder to hire COBOL programmers. So, I mean, I think that's definitely something that any mainframe-based company should be concerned with, is how am I going to staff future development? So, yes, from that standpoint, we deal with C#, we deal with a lot of low-code, no-code stuff. Definitely from that standpoint, Microsoft is very appealing on being able to hire staffing going forward. Okay, I'll take a break for questions here again in a little bit. I'm going to keep going. The first internally developed system, and I actually have a demo for you all on this, I promise, is the Legal Action Workflow System, abbreviated LAWS. It's very clever because it's for one of the attorney groups in TDCJ. This one is for State Council for Offenders. This is the group of attorneys in TDCJ that represent inmates when needed. So in the demo, we're gonna show here, you'll see the term clients used. So just know that in this case, the clients means inmates. Again, these demos are going to be a little bit bare bones because I can't really have any data up on the screen. I just want to give you an idea of the evolution here. This particular software was intended as case management for that organization, SEFO. They did organization, scheduling, reminders, reports, and as you'll see in the demo, we got some additional benefits out of it. The most important thing about this project was that it was done on a true 3-month development timeline. So that was start to finish. We used a loose, agile type structure. State Council for Offenders is located in Huntsville along with IT. So we were able to get a lot of face time in with users. I'm using the term loose agile structure here. It was very minimally staffed. So this was largely 2 developers, less than 500 total development hours. So not a lot in the way of strict agile methodology, but we did use that kind of development, collect stories, iterate, that type of, in so much as that's agile development. So basically, requirements were received, a first draft of the software was built before we even really had the first meeting with the users. So that first draft took maybe 80 hours out of the 500 hours. So just showing how rapidly you're able to develop with these systems. The balance of the time up to the 500 hours was weekly review sessions with the users, take down their stories, make the revisions, and work our way towards a finished product. Laws is a fairly basic Dynamics model-driven app. The users interact through the standard Dynamics unified interface through the model-driven portion of the app. So unlike the IVSS system, there's no portal here. This is all done internally. The reporting is done through SSRS, SQL Server Reporting Service. There is an integration, again, a one-way integration with our legacy systems that allow the users to access inmate and employee data. Before I run the demo, just some quick pros and cons of doing it internal versus doing the COTS. So I'm not going to dwell on this slide too much, but the big one here obviously is cost. You can imagine state programmer developer salary divided by 500 hours. That's just fairly minimal cost to get this project off the ground. Obviously, it was very fast. We were aided in this case because we were in the same city as SEFO, start to finish in 3 months. A lot of control over design. We were able to incorporate everything that the users wanted. Easier on the users, just having to deal with someone internal versus a vendor. And the big hidden one is down here is the staff gaining experience. So this was another, in addition to the cost product, this was a way we were able to get some skills inside the IT building here to move forward with. Cons, you'll notice I also have staffing listed over here just because you do have to dedicate some staff to the project and it does require retraining. Cons, difficult to determine level of effort. This is something that goes away over time. You do get more skills determining your level of effort. Maintenance, of course, is your own internal responsibility going forward, and procurement can be complicated. This is just by virtue of it being, you have some new SKU numbers popping up. You got to do your own research on what you need to procure. Okay, I'm going to run the demo here. And I'm going to take the first, there's no talking. I'm going to talk over the video here. So this video is just going to play. I'm going to take the opportunity here just to talk a little bit about the visual style of a Dynamics model-driven application. So if you have any experience with this system, this is kind of what it looks like. It all looks the same. So from a developer standpoint, I can't say it's always a horrible thing, but we get a lot of requests to adjust the visual style from our users, and the bottom line is that's just not something that you can do with the unified interface here. So this interface was designed to be able to work on any type of screen. So you could pull up this software on a phone or on a tablet or on a PC, and it doesn't just resize things, it actually changes the types of controls that you have there. So basically it works well on any type of device. So I would encourage everyone to not be too discouraged by the visual style here. The other big pro of it is that once you train a user on one of these platforms, they can generally pick up any model-driven Dynamics application, and they can navigate around it and it makes sense here. So turning back here to the specific demo here, I'm going through the actions to create a new case record. SCFO has a few different departments, demonstrating how we can do some filters. The idea behind the software is to make it as easy as possible on the users. So all of these fields will be filtered based on prerequisite data. So we chose a criminal defense record and we only saw case types that were related to criminal defense. We're only going to see legal assistance related to criminal defense, things like that. Here we're pulling in some data on a client, so this is referring to an inmate. So again, this is data that was integrated with our legacy mainframe data source. We'll click on the client info. So this is sort of a snapshot of this is the type of data we're pulling over from mainframe to view in this system. Case actions, this was a little bit of a subsystem that got added that ended up having quite a bit of automation hanging off of it. So you can imagine that a lot of time it's not actually the attorney going into the system, it's the legal assistant that's documenting things on the case. So this case action system was a activity kind of log that let them track different aspects of their case, and they could set reminders or email data based on, you can see this track this action item here. So again, this was a little bit of a way for the legal assistant to communicate with the attorney, maybe get something in email form that they didn't want to have to navigate to the record to get. So there's automation hanging off the back end of that. So, you know, and if there's any developers in the room, you know that anytime we say automation, usually that term is loaded with a whole lot of time involved with it. So again, just keep in mind this whole platform here was done in less than 500 total development hours in 3 months. One of the neat integrations, or internal integrations, I should say, we got with this system was tying the different departments together. So you see me here creating an investigation. So this is an internal department and an internal area of SCFO. So instead of, you know, in the old days, you might take a stack of papers and drop it off on someone's desk. So in this case, directly from the case record, we were able to create a record for an investigation. And then that investigation request just organically kind of shows up in the investigation department's queue. And then, of course, the investigation is going to do their work, and then that data gets passed back to the original requester, but it's still all attached to that core case record. So all of our data is in one place. We didn't have to do any paper shuffling to get it done. And the SCFO actually has a few different group. So there was also, for instance, a translation group. So same deal. We need a translation for this person. The request is put out, translation is done, and it's all attached to the same record. Second quick video here. Go. I think here I'm demonstrating the let me let it play for just a second. I haven't watched this video in a little bit. Make sure what I'm doing here. Okay, so I think I want to show you here is that this system was developed to be as maintainable by the customer as possible. So a lot of these lists, you see me here showing the staff list and the judges list. There's courts, counties, units. All of these things can be maintained by a power user within SCFO. So not all of these requests have to come back to IT for service. So this is accomplished through security rules, you know, and this is going to be an internal decision for you. But generally, you don't want to let the users have, you know, absolute control. You want to have enough restrictions in the system to make sure the data stays nice and clean. But in this case, there were a few things that we were able to maintain on their own. And the other big piece, and I'm pretty sure we're going to do here, is demonstrate the use of document templates. So you can imagine with a group of attorneys, they're going to want to generate a lot of documents. Dynamics is very strong in letting you use the records to generate predefined document templates. I'm honestly not sure what I'm trying to show y'all right here, so we'll just give myself a minute here. Skip. I think I accidentally went back to the same video, y'all. I don't think this was what I... Make sure I'm advancing my slide here. Ah, yes, that's what it was. I apologize. I was showing you all the same video again. Okay, so here we are creating a sample. This is one of the reports. This is through SSRS. I think I'm showing you all this. I just wanted to show you the performance of it. So this is actually a collection of about 120 queries happening here. It's very quick. It pumps out the results. In this particular case, SSRS was used because the users needed a print perfect report, and at the time our best option was using SSRS. So print perfect, I just mean you can hit the print button and it's going to look in a certain way when you get it out of the printer. I'm demonstrating a document template here. So this is a notice of appearance of counsel. So again, you can see this is a nicely formatted legal document where we got data automatically stuck in there. We didn't have to retype it. Okay, I'll move on. Let's see, do we have any questions hanging out there? Should I keep going
We do,
here?
Stephen. Yep.
Okay.
Are you in the process of moving away from the mainframe using Microsoft Power Platform, or will you still need the mainframe for instances where Power Platform won't support the move?
We are in the middle of a major migration effort. I am not authorized to talk about it though. So if you want to reach out to me outside the meeting, we can talk about it. But this movement that we're looking at here away from the mainframe is definitely happening at a larger pace. So we're absolutely looking at getting off the mainframe eventually.
Okay, and you touched on this a little bit, but why didn't you use Power BI reporting instead of SSRS? So just reiterate that real quick.
So in this case, it was the paginated reports. So being able to have the print perfect reports. Again, you got to realize this was really early in our development. We were still only at 2 developers that knew anything about the platform. So there are products now, Power BI Premium. There's some other tools that you can use to make paginated reports with Power BI. At the time, we just didn't have access to them. So SSRS was our option.
Okay. Did the internal dev approach extend the time frame of the project?
No, and I'm actually being kind of nice with that presentation. We actually tried a COTS product on that case management platform for SCFO first, and we ended up not proceeding with them. So that project had been running for, I think, 2 or 3 years, and we got the whole thing done in 3 months. So it had the opposite. It drastically shrunk the development timeline.
Fantastic. That's a great story. Have you ever considered using Canvas app instead of a model-driven app? If so, what are the deciding factors of choosing model-driven app?
Yeah, so we'll see a driven app coming up here in a minute as the technology evolves. The Canvas apps definitely have their role. So generally, they're more appropriate for smaller scope kind of work, very purpose-built. They have a narrowly defined use. They're useful where you need to have a particular visual style attached to your application. I mentioned that the model-driven apps are very rigid in their visual style. You can do whatever you want with the model-driven apps. For us, I think that it was appealing to have the database layer attached more closely to the software we were developing. So with a model-driven app in Dynamics, you get that database structure behind the scenes. When you're dealing with a Power App, you have to come up with that database structure yourself, which may be beneficial. Of course, if you're trying to integrate directly to legacy, you can definitely create a Power App that ties directly into your legacy data sources. I think it was really, at the time, we had that COTS product came on as a model-driven app, so that's probably just the default we went to for our first internal development.
Okay, great. That's the questions for now.
Ready. So 2020, at this point, so we did have some additional technology come online. As I mentioned, that is a factor that affected the direction we went on these things. So we got some additional connectors that made Power BI and Power Automate more usable for us. At this time, the demo I showed for y'all had a unified interface on the laws project. When we launched it, it didn't. It still had the legacy interface. So unified interface actually came in 2020. Mobile offline sync came available during this time. As you'll see, became very important. But really the key thing that happened during this time frame is we had more internal staff and more experience. So this next topic, I'm sure, is going to be something overly familiar to a lot of us, COVID test collection and reporting. You'll notice that this is labeled CV2 is our code name for this project, meaning this was not our first try at managing COVID data. So the first iteration of COVID tracking was done mostly with a large amount of staff and extremely large spreadsheets. So after months of forcing that process to work, and I'm sure TDCJ is not the only one, a lot of dedication and hours on the staff's part, we had the opportunity to rebuild the system, and it's what we're still currently using. What we found with the spreadsheet method was that errors were being introduced, largely at the time of collection, but obviously throughout the process. Even with a ton of VLOOKUPs, XLOOKUPs trying to match a row to a person, mistakes were happening, and it was only this huge amount of staff and oversight that was letting us process these thousands of records a day. So the strategy with the CV2 app was to improve the data collection at the time the test was taken and bring it forward natively into the system. Unfortunately for TDCJ, when they build prisons, they're generally not located in populated areas with great internet service. And the units themselves tend to be big concrete buildings, which are difficult locations. We took advantage of two key features, Dynamics and Power Platform, mobile offline sync, and the unified interface's capability of dynamically resizing based on screen size. I really do want to call out that testing inmates in the bowels of a prison is not a fun or easy task, so we needed to make the collection process as foolproof as possible. The software in this case is accessed through tablets that are locked up and charged in the warden's office overnight. In many cases, that's the only time throughout the day they'll have access to internet. During that time, the tablets download any new or changed inmate data or employee data that was collected throughout the day, and it was pushed back up. They pushed back up the testing data that they retrieved throughout the day. So inmates take the tablets into the unit, do the tests, bring them back to the warden's office, and that data is then synced back up to the cloud. I'm going to run the demo. It's going to be flipping between a standard PC view and a tablet view, so just a heads up. So I do want y'all to notice that the unified interface, it's not just a resizing, it actually adjusts the interface to make it more usable. And there's no developer activity required to make this happen. And hey, look, y'all are going to see some famous names. I think Jerry Duggar's here on the call with us. He's my test COVID recipient here. So this system did have some reports. Right now we're looking at the kind of behind the scenes view. This is what the administrative staff will see. This is where you're going to look at all tests taken during a particular time frame. We're flipping over here to this is what it would look more like on a phone or tablet here. So this is what the staff that's actually down at the unit is going to be seeing. So very simple interface. They're going to choose whether they're testing an employee or an inmate. Different type of testing they're doing, and this is kind of the different programs of testing we have. You can very rapidly find a particular employee. You can find them based on their name, employee ID, things like that. Again, this data is refreshed every day, so it's very up to date. Find their location. Again, these fields are designed to be used with your fingers, not just on a computer. You can actually hand type it in like you would on a phone. Some simple questions, and that's basically all the data collection required to collect a COVID test. After that, it's just actually performing the test. We can move on. We put in this particular piece of software what we called light mode. So for the off chance that we were not able to find an employee, this light mode lets you go in and just type that employee's user ID in there. And you see it's asking them to double validate that. So in this case, I did not type in the same employee ID. So basically what happens here is this light mode record gets brought back up to the cloud, and there's some automation behind the scenes that does the matching on that record. So if the person on the ground couldn't find them, we do the matching back behind the scenes. Like I said, the real focus of this was making it as seamless and easy as possible for the people on the ground. So again, this is the sort of administrative view that we're seeing. Dynamics is great about letting you do things like my last 5 tests, if you see how that view is generated there. So if I wanted to go back and say, okay, I messed up something on a test earlier today, or I want to get an idea of, what wing I was in when I was testing, things like that. Okay, I know everyone needs to stay inside their timeline and their schedule for the day. We're coming up on lunch hour, so I'm going to keep going here. I have one more demo I'd like to get through with y'all and a few key things as we come up on the end here. So real quick, I wanted to take a minute and talk about adoption. CVT uses Power BI data sets to share data. I mentioned earlier that the unified interface and the standard dynamic screens are pretty easy for users to pick up. I just want to call out that what we found surprisingly was that we had some different obstacles on the reporting side. So I'm sure TDCJ is not unique in having some extremely experienced staff that we've been relying on specific tasks for a long time. In this particular case, the staff that has historically been relied on reporting had a hard time shifting to understand how to utilize the Power BI data sets. So I think the main barrier there was that they were used to receiving very flat data that they then fed into their existing infrastructure. That's not the paradigm for Power BI. Once you have the data built, the reports and statistics are very simplified. So I just did want to call out here, when you look at adoption of these products, don't just look at the user side, look at some other areas that will be touching the software. In 2021, the main feature here is more. We had more experienced staff, more connectors, more understanding of the pricing of the products. From a technology standpoint, we were now able to embed Canvas apps inside of Dynamics, which we'll sort of see here coming up. Real quick, talking about the software here, is called the Confinee housing system. This is related to Operation Lone Star. So this is in the news a lot. Y'all probably have heard about it. This is Governor Abbott's effort to apprehend people at the border. TDCJ's role in this is we do the housing. So there are 2 units out in West Texas where we house the inmates, or in this case, they're referred to as confinees. It was very important to us to separate the data. We did not want to commingle inmate data with confinee data, confinee being the word being used to describe the people that are being apprehended. Again, calling out this internal development timeline. This is literally one of those things that we got to call, and Jerry's on the call with me, so he can talk to you firsthand on this. We got to call Friday. That we needed to have something ready to run on Monday. So this whole thing, the initial deployment, and the demo I'm going to show you has been built out since then, but the initial deployment was done in 3 days. This one does have some more in-depth integrations. It uses some legacy data, same kind of data that the law system uses. It does integrate also with some vendors, so we receive some data from counties that actually do the arrests, so we have data on these people before they reach us. And I think we actually also have an integration with one of the commissary vendors at this time. And in this case, I mentioned that the reporting was done via Power BI. Okay, again, we're going back to this sort of ubiquitous interface here. I will add, in this case, we did have some repeat users. So we had some users that operated this system that had seen some of our previous systems. So again, it's very easy for users to jump into any of these systems. A little bit boring on the visual style, but it does make it a lot easier for users. Oh, I skip back here. So again, this is very sensitive data, so I don't have any live data, but this pane here in the middle, I don't know if y'all can see my mouse, but the empty pane there in the middle is actually an embedded Power App. So in Canvas app. So in this case, the Canvas app is used to display photos. So when we have this record come in from the county, the center area here will be populated with the photo. This is really a fully fledged housing system. We can assign beds. We have information on disciplinaries, how to classify the different people. As you can imagine, we don't put two very different people in a cell next to each other. We have criteria we use for that. We can schedule a visitation, view historical information. So again, the emphasis really is on the very short development time frame you can get this accomplished in. And this one, was more than just basic. This is quite an in-depth system still being used. Okay, and I'm going to rush on a little bit so we get through everything. This is so much easier to do on a Teams call versus doing live when I can see the clock right in front of me. I wanted to talk about the lessons learned part here. So we talked about how this is not an app in a day. This is trying to give you all a possible path forward. So choosing a path, look for the path of least resistance. For us, that was COTS. And then as I mentioned, someone asked the question, it was, path of least resistance. We demonstrated the success. We took what we had. We made with it what we could. The staffing, as I mentioned, very important aspect of the project. Take advantage of all training opportunities. I mean, I was pretty clear that we used some of these projects as training opportunities. We were able to walk out of them with increasingly expert staff. This remember to build vertically is a call out to make sure you're not just training developers. We need to get the admins, the network, the security folks, the project managers, everyone needs to be involved. And I teased you all a little bit on the new employee training initiatives, but just keep in mind that it is definitely capable. I can confidently say that I can take a new developer that has no experience in these systems and get them doing productive work within 3 months. So we're not talking about the massive onboarding times you get with some other software. Procurement, if you're a Texas agency, reach out to other Texas agencies, but basically, reach out to other groups that have similar experience to you, revisit your pricing and licensing frequently, and budget space for practice. This was going back to that original bit of foresight where we had a little bit of development environment to play with. And someone asked me about planning earlier. I do believe that if you're an organization that's capable of planning 5-10 years in the future with detail, that my hat's off to you. But don't feel like you have to do that. These products are available as you go. You don't have to implement the full gamut right away. You can start with something and build on top of that. And prioritize governance. So basically, this was a call out to making sure you're bringing your legacy staff along with you. Okay, we got 5 minutes left.
Nice job, first of all, great. So we do have a question from, lots of clapping, great job. So Brian Schmidt does have a question. Are any of your applications leveraging Azure services such as B2C or Logic apps? Any issues or roadblocks to the department adopting Azure usage?
So as I mentioned, we're historically a mainframe shop, and I teased you all on a big modernization effort, and Logic apps, function apps, those things are definitely Service Bus, all of that's definitely a part of a larger plan. So everything I demonstrated for you all today are relatively small applications. Obviously, we're talking about COVID and the Operation Lone Star stuff. They're not unimportant applications, but it's not a full-on modernization effort, but definitely those products are involved with a bigger effort. Roadblocks, like I said, they kind of pop up in unanticipated spots. I mean, it really was the users have have tended to be very receptive to the software. It's sometimes some of the staff that's used to doing things in a certain way. Coming from mainframe, we have some staff that's used to green screens, and you can watch those folks. They'll zip through that system with no problem at all. But you put a mouse and a more modern interface in front of them, and it's tough. So Roadblocks, I would say, is just making sure you're bringing all your people along with them.
Great. Okay, are you using a P1 processor or higher for the PBI premium capacity?
We do not have premium right yet. So this is all just using the 360 or Mary, correct me if I get the verbiage wrong, but the 365, the Azure version of Power BI. We have some Power BI desktop usage, but this is still using the web interface.
Great. Are you loading CSV files from the mainframe with data flows?
We do some of that, yes. Most of the data we're getting is still inherited from that process we put in place back on the laws project. So that's a little bit fancier than just transporting CSV files. There's a little bit of custom code that makes that operation handle, but Power Automate is something that is amazing from a developer standpoint. We use it. A lot of these things that you're seeing where I call out automation is actually Power Automate happening in the background.
Okay. Do you connect directly to mainframe from Power BI?
We do. There is a connector that lets you do that. There's obviously a lot of security concerns involved there. So generally, we stage the data. Generally, the data is not retrieved directly. There's some sort of staging that happens. So it can be done. We do it in some cases, but just a heads up that, watch out for the security concerns there. There you go. G5 includes Power BI Pro. Yep. That's the language I was looking for. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, Doug. Yep. So we will make the recording available. We'll either put it on the DUG4GOV site or we will send a link for the recording. So we will work on that. Any additional questions? We have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to watch for additional questions. And Stephen, thanks for dropping your email address in the chat. Appreciate that. You might get a lot of calls, or a lot of inquiries, so be ready for that. Okay. One of the things I do want to say is we do offer these peer presentations the 4th Tuesday of every month at this time, and we would love to hear from other customers. So any customer that would like to be the next Stephen at TDCJ, please raise their hand, send me an email. We would love to hear from you. And with that, if there are no more questions, I think we can conclude for the day. Thanks again, Stephen. It was great, like always. And thanks everybody for attending today.
Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.